There's a fascinating new article in CNBC, and the title of it is OpenAI and Anthropic Face New AI Realities as Companies Shift from Token Maxing to Efficiency. So today on the podcast, we want to break that down because I think there's going to be a lot of big shifts we see in people's personal use, but maybe more so in enterprise use, where we're going from we had all of these companies who it's going to sound more and more cringy in the future, but they had basically like these benchmarks inside their organization of who was using the most tokens, and we found that people were using their tokens on terrible things and wasting a lot of money, and so people are putting it on all of these price or budget constraints, and different things are shifting. So anyways, we're moving from enterprises being like, all right, everybody adopt AI and absolutely just use it as much as you can, to, okay, how do we strategically use this? Something that I have been saying for a very long time on the podcast is just because you can do something with AI doesn't mean you should do something with AI. So we'll talk about when you should and shouldn't, what that looks like. We're going to get into all of it. This is a good one. I'll kick it over to you, Connor. What were your thoughts when you originally saw this article on CNBC and the topic in general?
This is a cool one. By the way, guys, I wish you could see what I see right now. So Jaeden and I do this over at Riverside, if you use that platform. So Jaeden and I got on this morning, and Jaden's like bouncing up and down. And I'm like, hey, everything okay? He's literally sitting on a yoga ball in his podcast studio holding Clay. How old is Clay right now, Jaeden?
He's 2.5 weeks. Yeah. He's sleeping right now, but mom was up all night with him, and I'm like, you know what? He's quiet. So if you guys hear any like baby grunting noises in the background, that's what's happening. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll probably see me bouncing up and down. But yeah, he's having a good time. I guess the sound of my voice lulls him to sleep, so I must be really boring or something. Hopefully that's not with the rest of the audience, but it works with him.
I'm gonna speak in soothing tones about token maxing today. Token maxing is one of those things where you're either interested in it or you're not. For those of you who are, I get it, but not. Let me just sort of say this: the most insane strategy that we heard coming out of places, even like Meta, were almost, it was like a leaderboard saying, hey, how many tokens are you guys using? And the proof, I mean, the idea there was to try to prove that people were using AI. Like, guys, you got to use AI because it's so efficient, all that kind of stuff. It was the most bizarre thing. It's like sort of like setting a leaderboard for who can eat the most like chocolate chip cookies. It's like people are going to use it, man. And if people weren't using it, then they'll just game it and like literally like waste water, so to speak. I mean, they're just like crushing the environment more than anything else, probably. But here's the crazy thing about it is that there's two different sort of like AIs, and I just want to make that clear. There's actually kind of like three. I mean, when I think about two different AIs, I think one AI built into product that you don't see, and the other is how people use it. But when we work with like companies and things like that, right? Like there's a whole thing of like, oh, well, our adoption rate is, 80%. And you realize it's not really, it's just people who use, ChatGPT like a search engine 5 times a week, and that counts as adopted. That's one thing. That doesn't have anything to do with token maxing. Let's make that clear. These are people who just have a license to Copilot, something like that, and they're just using it, but they're paying. Look, I think it's expensive, but not the end of the world, right? It's $20 per person per month. That's pretty standard. Token maxing, something totally different, is when you're essentially using the API, where it's just how many tokens can you use. In fact, Jaeden, just yesterday or 2 days ago, there was this article that or this study that came out about how OpenAI used agents internally, which was also really interesting, right? Because they're like using tons and tons of tokens, but OpenAI doesn't care if they use tokens. It's like they're sort of like, they're buying their own product essentially. But the reason that this is so interesting, beyond just like how dumb is this that they're trying to prove that they use AI by using more tokens, more importantly is the economic story about this, because we have 2 giant IPOs coming out. I don't think anybody missed the news that SpaceX made Elon Musk, a trillionaire, and Anthropic and OpenAI are both prepping for an IPO. And you guys probably know pretty much, how these things work. But just understand that stock price is not built on what's happening today. It's built on future expectations, right? That's how stock prices are set, right? It's like, if you could be selling tons and tons and tons, but if people don't think that that's going to grow, in other words, growth is built into the stock market price. And I say all that because this is what token maxing is so, where it comes in so relevant. Because like, if you look at the absolutely incredible, IPO possibilities between OpenAI and Anthropic, the big question coming out here is, what does that do to stock price. Now, I don't think it's going to do anything. It's not a stock price yet, but like, what does that do to the value of these two companies? Because if we are entering a stage where we are just kind of coming over the hump of we got to use more and more and more into, oh my gosh, like we're using way too much, that's huge. So the in this article is pointing out that the CEO of Lindy was sort of like literally just like switched off Claude and moved 100% to DeepSeek. So now, Jaeden, we're starting to pivot into what is this story trying to tell here? One is how dumb token maxing is, but I think we already knew that. The other one is, well, what does this do to the IPOs of OpenAI and Anthropic if suddenly people are like, whoa, we used to think like, let's spend everything we have on it. And now we're like, hold on, let's get way more efficient. Everybody hold back the reins. What does that do to that? And third, Jaeden, and take this wherever you want, is what does this mean about Chinese models versus Anthropic and OpenAI? I don't think there's any question that Anthropic, OpenAI, and whatever's coming out of Google, hopefully soon, are way more powerful. But DeepSeek at a fraction of the cost and other things like that. Like, so does that mean, because what I would have said a year ago, sorry, I'm talking a lot here, but like, let me just say this. It's also, I'm trying to sort of like let Jaeden bounce a little bit. What I would have said a year ago is, the government is all in on protecting OpenAI and Anthropic and everything like that. But now the government doesn't like Anthropic. They're okay with OpenAI, but even with that, there's issues. But do they want China? In other words, like, is this a whole Walmart situation? Are we just buying cheap Chinese products, and is that going to take over the AI race? Jaeden, there's like 5 different ways we can go with this.
Oh, I got answers for all your questions.
Go on.
Okay, so the China question I think is really important, and especially in light of what happened yesterday, which we could do a whole podcast episode on. But Anthropic is accusing Alibaba of doing a 28.8 million query distillation attack on Claude. Basically, distillation attack, well, if they call it attack, it's hardly an attack. But basically what it means is that Alibaba made 25,000, they call them fraudulent accounts. And I mean, maybe they're fraudulent. Maybe it's against Anthropic's terms of service. It's so tricky because, I mean, it's basically they're a paying customer. So it feels like they should be able to do what they want, but whatever. Anyways, what's happening is Alibaba makes 25,000 accounts. They go and query 28 million questions to Anthropic. They get the question and they get the response. They build it into a data set that they then train their model. So it's called model distillation. They train a model just based off of the data that Anthropic gave them. Because instead of having to make your model figure out how to answer questions, you could just make it figure out how Anthropic answers questions. It doesn't have to kind of have like there's a lot of a black box in AI, but it doesn't really have to have a lot of the brains that figure it out. It's just, I mean, it's basically using Anthropic kind of as the rubric, and you're able to make a model. And these models are actually really good. And Anthropic is worried about this. They sent a letter to the Senate Banking Committee saying basically like, look, we have this problem. Alibaba's like ripping us off. And by the way, there's other companies that have done this as well. I think they said that DeepSeek, Moonshot, and Minimax, these are all 3 Chinese models, and all of them back in February did something similar. But this is the biggest one yet because there was 28 million messages. Now, the thing that the question that it raises for me is, number one, when we talk about token maxing and then they're like, oh no, what if people go to the Chinese models? Like, the Chinese models are just a distillation of Anthropic. Makes you wonder, are there cheaper ways for Anthropic or these other models to make their models? It's kind of tricky because Anthropic's spending billions, and then these other ones can go and kind of like knock it off or clone it or whatever. There's not really some sort of copyright. It's also, I think, for a lot of people, they'll find it deeply ironic because Anthropic went and ripped off everyone's content on the internet, and it's now serving it to us for $20 a month or $200 a month. And then when someone else tries to rip off Anthropic and do the same thing, Anthropic's mad. So it's like really funny because it's like,
I was thinking the same thing.
So anyways, I think that's a funny point with it. So anyways, I do think that it's going to get to a point, though, that we do have to ask ourselves the question. You brought up the CEO or CMO or someone over at Lindy.
Yeah, CEO of Lindy, yeah.
Switched to DeepSeek. I mean, if I'm being 100% honest, I would say if you're doing serious work, you want the most serious model. And when you do a distillation attack with DeepSeek, Moonshot, and Minimax on Anthropic, you can make a good model. It's not a perfect clone, right? It's going to be a little distorted. It might be like 20%, like 80% as good as Anthropic's frontier model. But my question is, like, if you're the CEO of a big company, why would you not use the 100% best model? So that's my first thing. And I'm not saying you have to token max. I'm not saying you have to like use the smartest model for all the dumbest things, but I'm really baffled when I hear people be like, I switched off of Claude and I switched just to DeepSeek. I'm like, oh, okay, so you're just admittedly taking like a 25% or 30% quality hit on whatever your AI model, like, I don't know. To me, that
Okay,
makes
wait,
me
no,
feel like
hold on. So I have a hot take on that,
okay.
which is this is what's so strange about AI. By the way, I love where this conversation went. Totally came in out of left field, which I now am obsessed with this conversation. So that's true. You could use the best model. But Jaeden, like, think about it. Like, work isn't really changing, right? Like, the work at Lindy, the work in every place, it hasn't changed. It's not sort of like it. Yes, there's some like software development that's changed, but nothing is moving at the pace of AI. So let's take us back in time to, let's call it, I don't know, March of this year. So like whatever, 3, 4 months ago, whenever that was, right? At that point, I think probably Claude point 6 had probably come out, something like that.
Yeah.
And at that point, we are like, this is amazing, all that kind of stuff. So if DeepSeek could reach up to even Claude 4.5, and that felt like state of the art to all these companies and what they were doing, then why wouldn't a company look? I'm kind of with you on this about like,
No, no.
knockoff,
I
but do you know what I
like
mean?
the
Like why wouldn't they want like Sonnet or Haiku or something like that? Like, in other words, guys, like a cheaper model that back in December, which, guys, is not exactly yesteryear, right? That was 6 months ago. And at that time, it felt completely transformational. So it's not like this is the end of history where like with Claude 4.8 high is the number one model. 4 months ago, I was like, this is the best thing that I've ever seen in the world. And if DeepSeek is now there, it's not, again, it's not like the work has to keep up. It's not like you're competing. Like every company's still doing the same thing. Do you know what I mean? Like this, and same thing, meaning the same thing that they were always doing to drive value before. Everybody's trying to figure out AI. So if I throw that back in your face, like why wouldn't people just use, DeepSeek, if assuming that it's not a cheap Chinese, ripoff of an iPhone, but rather it's just slightly less intelligent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically with the comparison of DeepSeek, we're going like really off topic of the token
No, I
maxing,
love this. I
but
love this.
like just for people, because this might be interesting if you're, and you'll probably hear this argument from a lot of people, because I've heard people as well be like, so for AI Box, for example, like you can talk to 80 different AI models on my platform, AIbox.ai. And I recently had someone say we had to pull DeepSeek off the platform because our DeepSeek provider, they dropped DeepSeek. Anyways, so we got to go make a deal with DeepSeek to get them on. It's like a whole debacle right now. But in any case, it's off the platform and someone was complaining about it. And so anyways, this is something that actually comes up. And the reason that they were using DeepSeek is because it was cheaper. Like that's what they're like, hey, look, I like DeepSeek because it was cheaper. No one's like, I like DeepSeek because it has the best answers. Like, I've never heard anyone say that, but they're like,
Right.
it's
Yep.
cheaper, which is fair. But my thing is like, with OpenAI and with Anthropic, like they have their cheaper, less capable models. So I mean, there's that option. If you want to like stick it to the man and you don't like Anthropic and OpenAI, like okay, whatever. But like, I think realistically, where this whole like whatever, that's all funny stuff. What this all comes down to me is Claude. And by the way, for the first time ever, I think OpenAI has a massive comeback opportunity with Codex and some of the new features they dropped with Codex. So I've been like off the OpenAI bandwagon for a long time. I think I'm going to get back on this week. So get ready for me to start talking about this. But Claude specifically can do things for you. It's not about the model. Like, oh, great. Like, your DeepSeek is as good as Claude 4.45 or whatever. Like, I don't really care how chatting with it anymore because like most of the time I'm using AI is no longer to chat with it. Most of the time I'm using Claude nowadays. It's a side screen on the side of my computer. And I'm like, hey, Claude, I need to download these 100 files for this licensing deal I'm working on. And I have to format them all a certain way. Go download them from this link, format the waves to be 44 hertz and diarize all of the audio. So you split the people that are talking and put them into this specific format. And then when you're done that, here's 10 other folders. I need you to go do that. Goodbye. Claude goes and works for half an hour and it does that all for me. Like DeepSeek, Moonshot, Minimax, like nobody has the capabilities that Claude has there. And Codex, by the way, I think has them as well. And maybe even some better ways because Codex is a really cool feature they just rolled out. But anyways, so long story short, like my whole rant is, I get it. We want to be cheaper, but like at the end of the day, some of the capabilities that are being unlocked right now, like don't sleep on that. Don't just be like, I'm going to go use DeepSeek or Moonshot because it's slightly cheaper. Guys, Claude can freaking control your computer screen. It can look at the code. It can edit every single file you have. It can scale up whatever you're doing like 10 times X. It's insane. I'm building a data set. I'm trying. My goal is building a data set to sell to audio licensing companies with 100,000 hours of audio. There is no way I could do that. I need a whole company to do that. But guess what? Claude is like messaging people. It's procuring audio for me. It's editing all the audio. It's managing this massive project on the side of like a company I'm actually running. And it's going to be a really awesome thing for me. There is no way any of these other companies could do it. So I rest my case. Like, don't give up on
You know
Claude.
what? No, you sold me. This is, guys, this is the scene in the movie in the courtroom where everybody stands up and cheers and the judge is pounding the gavel saying, order, order. Like, you have me, you have me, Jaeden. In fact, Jaeden, note to ourselves, let's do the next podcast when we get back together. Let's do it on that, because I'm dying to talk more about that. I know we're at time. Guys, listen, if one of the big things we're talking about here is comparing models, check out AIbox.ai. It's unbelievably easy. It's unbelievably inexpensive. It's my favorite way to just like compare answers between Claude, Gemini, OpenAI, all these other models. It's just like super, super easy. It's Jaden's company. It's fantastic. AIbox.ai. Guys, we will see you on the next episode.